They say a snake must shed its skin to survive. But what happens when it's not the skin that needs shedding, but the self? Carl Jung hinted at a forbidden idea, one so unsettling that most people never dare to confront it. It's the notion that who you think you are must die before who you truly are can emerge. Not metaphorically, psychologically, spiritually, existentially. This is not the gentle path of self-improvement or positive thinking. This is annihilation, the burning of your false identity in the furnace of awareness. Jung called it the process of individuation, but beneath that term lies a much deeper and darker transformation, the death of the ego's illusion. In this video, we will explore the hidden dimensions of this idea, the psychological alchemy of self-destruction and rebirth, the role of the shadow in dissolving the old self, and how embracing the forbidden depths of your own mind can lead to true liberation. By the end, you'll understand why real transformation doesn't come from becoming more, but from becoming nothing. To understand Jung's forbidden idea, we must first dismantle one of the greatest illusions humanity ever built, the illusion of a stable, permanent self. From the moment you are born, fragments of identity begin to attach to you like dust on a mirror. You're a good child. You're not like your brother. You're intelligent, shy, rebellious, gifted, broken. These labels, repeated and reinforced by society, family, and culture, weave themselves into the architecture of your mind until you mistake them for truth. But Jung suggested something radical, that this constructed self, the persona, is merely a mask we wear to survive in the world. Behind it lies something infinite and terrifying, the unconscious self that holds both our light and our darkness. He saw that every human being lives in two worlds simultaneously, the outer world of roles and expectations, and the inner world of symbols, instincts, and forgotten dreams. The persona helps us navigate the first, but it also imprisons us, because the more we identify with it, the more disconnected we become from the ocean of the unconscious that actually gives life to who we are. This is the prison of the ego. It convinces us that survival equals authenticity, and so we defend it, protect it, polish it, and feed it illusions. But the price of that protection is the loss of the deeper self, the self with a capital S, the divine center Jung said exists beyond all opposites. The forbidden Jungian idea is this: to be reborn as your true self, your old self must die. That means allowing the structures that once kept you safe to collapse. It means facing the shadow, the hidden, repressed aspects of your psyche that you deny, fear, or despise. Jung warned that what you resist not only persists, but grows stronger in the darkness. The more you repress the shadow, the more it manifests externally as projection. Those moments when you condemn others for the very qualities you secretly carry within. The thief sees everyone as deceitful. The arrogant see others as vain. The shadow always reveals itself through the world around you. This process is terrifying because it demands that you stop running from what you've buried. To face the shadow is to step into your own psychological underworld, guided not by light, but by the faint glimmer of intuition and the courage to descend. It is what myths have always tried to tell us: the journey of the hero into the abyss, the death before resurrection, Orpheus descending into Hades, Christ into the tomb, the alchemist descending into Nigredo, the black stage of transformation. Each story whispers the same truth: before illumination, there must be dissolution. When Jung analyzed dreams and symbols, he realized they were not random fragments of the mind, but messages from this deeper unconscious trying to restore balance. Nightmares, breakdowns, and even synchronistic events are not enemies. They are invitations to see what the ego refuses to acknowledge. The unconscious is not trying to destroy you, it's trying to wake you up. But to the ego, awakening feels like death. Imagine standing in front of a mirror that begins to melt. Your reflection distorts, dissolves, and vanishes. Who are you when the image disappears? That moment of void is what Jung called the confrontation with the self. It's a moment when every identity, belief, and label crumbles, and you face the raw, unfiltered awareness underneath. Most people retreat when this happens. They cling to distractions, to roles, to anything that feels solid. But those who remain, those who let the mirror dissolve, discover something profound, that the one who observes the death of the self is not the self at all, but consciousness itself. Jung hinted that individuation, the path toward wholeness, is not about self-improvement but self-integration. It's not about becoming better, but about becoming whole. The persona, the shadow, the anima or animus, the self, all must be seen, embraced, and unified. But this cannot happen as long as the ego clings to its throne. The ego must be dethroned not through force, but through surrender, through a radical acceptance of what is. This is why Jung was considered dangerous by some of his contemporaries. He was not offering comfort, he was offering annihilation of illusion. He spoke of inner alchemy, of transforming the lead of unconscious suffering into the gold of consciousness. But alchemy begins in darkness, in the blackening, the chaos, the putrefaction of what once was. The old self must decay so that a new pattern can emerge from within. In modern terms, this transformation can feel like a psychological crisis, a dark night of the soul where meaning collapses and identity dissolves. You may feel lost, directionless, detached from who you thought you were. Yet, as Jung discovered, this psychological death is often the birth canal of the deeper self. It is not a breakdown, it is a breaking open. To destroy your old self is not an act of violence, but an act of revelation. The self that dies is the false one, the collection of masks, fears, and borrowed beliefs. And when it crumbles, what remains is not emptiness, but presence. The self is not created, it's uncovered. It was always there, waiting beneath the rubble of identity. So when Jung spoke of transformation, he wasn't speaking metaphorically. He meant it literally. The psyche reorganizes itself when the conscious mind surrenders control. The old personality, like a cocoon, must crack open for the butterfly to emerge. But the butterfly doesn't drag its cocoon into the sky. It leaves it behind. The same is true for you. You cannot ascend while still clinging to the ground of who you used to be. As we descend deeper into Jung's forbidden territory, we begin to see that this process, the destruction of the old self, is not a single event, but a cycle, a living spiral that repeats throughout one's life. Transformation is never comfortable, because it is an initiation. In the ancient mystery schools, initiates were symbolically buried before being reborn into higher states of consciousness. Jung realized that this same archetypal pattern operates within the psyche. Every time we approach a greater level of awareness, something within us must die to make space for it. The unconscious is like the fertile soil of the earth. It gives birth only after what is old has decomposed. The ego, however, resists this death with all its might. It clings to certainty, control, and identity. It fears the unknown more than it fears suffering. And so it builds psychological walls, habits of thought, rigid beliefs, and moral defenses to protect itself from what Jung called the numinous, the raw power of the unconscious. Yet, paradoxically, it is precisely through confronting this numinous energy that one evolves. Jung described encounters with the unconscious as both divine and dangerous, like approaching a sacred fire. If you come too close without humility, you are burned by inflation, believing yourself godlike. But if you never approach at all, you remain cold, trapped in the mundane illusion of separateness. The true task, then, is to stand at the threshold, between order and chaos, between ego and self. This is the razor's edge of transformation. The ancients called it the alchemical opus, the great work. Jung reinterpreted it as the psychological journey of individuation. Every symbol of death and rebirth, phoenix, crucifix, chrysalis, points toward this same inner event, the dissolution of the false and the emergence of the real. But what makes this process so forbidden is that it directly opposes the modern obsession with self-enhancement. In the age of constant optimization, new habits, new affirmations, new versions of you, the idea of letting the self die sounds almost blasphemous. Our culture tells us to build, accumulate, and improve, but Jung's wisdom whispers, you cannot fill a cup that is already full. You must first empty it. True change is not about adding, it's about subtraction. It's about peeling away everything that isn't authentically you, until what remains is pure consciousness. Think of it as psychological composting, the decaying remnants of your old identity, the failures, wounds, and illusions, become the nourishment for your emerging self. Every crisis that breaks you, every heartbreak that dismantles your defenses, every dark night that shatters your sense of meaning, these are not punishments, but initiations. Life is not trying to destroy you. It's trying to liberate you from the smaller self you outgrew. When Jung spoke of the shadow, he didn't mean something merely negative. The shadow is the repository of everything you reject about yourself. Yes, the anger, jealousy, and fear, but also your unused strength, your forgotten creativity, your unlived life. To integrate the shadow is to reclaim your wholeness. But you cannot integrate what you refuse to acknowledge. This is why projection is the key to understanding transformation. The world mirrors back the parts of yourself you cannot yet accept. The people who irritate you, the situations that provoke you, the fears that chase you, all of them are fragments of your own psyche, demanding recognition. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This is the secret of alchemy. Illumination is born from darkness. To destroy your old self means to walk into that darkness willingly, to descend into the psyche's underworld, not to escape it, but to discover the treasure buried there. Myths call this the treasure hard to attain, the gold guarded by the dragon. The dragon, of course, is your shadow, the very thing you fear to face. The treasure is your authentic self. During this descent, the ego experiences what feels like death. Anxiety, depression, confusion, and loss of meaning often accompany this stage. Jung compared it to the alchemical nigredo, the blackening phase where everything decomposes into chaos. Yet within that chaos lies the seed of creation. The psyche reorganizes itself through the very act of suffering. Pain becomes the crucible of transformation. Just as iron is purified through fire, consciousness is refined through confrontation with its own unconscious depths. This is not a romantic journey. It's raw, disorienting, and humbling. The ego cries out for certainty, while the deeper self whispers, "Trust the unknown." Jung himself endured this descent. During his confrontation with the unconscious, he recorded visions, dialogues, and revelations that became the Red Book, a map of psychic transformation. There, he realized that the unconscious is not an enemy, but a vast intelligence seeking union with consciousness. The destruction of the old self is not an act of violence, but a sacred marriage. The alchemical conjunctio, where the opposites within you, light and shadow, masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious, unite to form wholeness. To undergo this transformation is to step out of time, to sense the eternal within the temporary. The false self lives in fear because it believes it can die. The true self knows it is deathless, for it is not bound by form. When the illusion of the separate I dissolves, what remains is the realization that the entire cosmos breathes through you. You are not a fragment looking for completion. You are the totality remembering itself. This realization is what destroys the old self, not through effort, but through awakening. Like a dreamer realizing they are dreaming, you awaken within your own psyche and see that every persona, every mask, was simply consciousness playing different roles. The destruction of the self is, in truth, the revelation of unity. To truly grasp the depth of Jung's forbidden revelation, we must explore its most paradoxical truth. Transformation is not an ascent. It is a descent. The old self does not vanish in a flash of enlightenment. It dissolves slowly, like ice melting into water. The journey toward wholeness feels at first like regression. You may feel like you are falling backward, losing control, unraveling. But in Jungian psychology, this is precisely the path, a deliberate movement downward into the unconscious, into the shadow, into the buried roots of your psyche. You cannot climb toward light until you have retrieved what is hidden in the dark. Jung warned that the unconscious is not some chaotic pit to be feared. It is the other half of reality itself. To ignore it is to live only half a life. Every suppressed emotion, every unacknowledged desire, every fear you avoid becomes an autonomous fragment of the psyche, a complex. These complexes orbit the ego like moons around a planet, pulling it, distorting it, sometimes consuming it entirely. When your old self begins to collapse, what is truly happening is that these autonomous forces, your shadow elements, demand to be integrated. They no longer accept exile. This confrontation can feel like madness, because the mind that used to control your narrative begins to lose its dominance. But Jung taught that what appears as chaos is often a deeper intelligence reorganizing your psyche. He once said, "In all chaos there is a cosmos, in all disorder a secret order." The old self dissolves not into nothingness, but into a more profound structure of being, an order beyond comprehension, one that the conscious mind must learn to trust. This is the moment of psychological crucifixion, the ego nailed to the cross of its own contradictions. The mind screams for certainty, but certainty belongs to the old self. The new self lives in paradox. You must learn to be both human and divine, finite and infinite, broken and whole. Jung's alchemical vision was that individuation, the emergence of the true self, is the union of opposites. It's not about erasing darkness, but marrying it with light. Not about transcending pain, but finding meaning through it. Imagine consciousness as a vast mandala, a sacred circle in which every part of you has a place. The old self tries to sit at the center, claiming control. But as you awaken, you realize the ego is only one pattern within the circle, not its ruler. The true center, the self, is impersonal, eternal, and profoundly still. It observes without judgment. It doesn't cling to identity. It simply is. When you begin to live from that center, you no longer act from fear or desire, but from alignment with the deeper intelligence of life itself. This realization is terrifying to the ego because it marks the end of its illusion of power. It must surrender to something greater. This is why Jung's teaching was considered dangerous, because it undermined not only personal ego structures, but collective ones. Religion, culture, and politics all depend on stable identities. The moment you transcend identity, you become ungovernable, not rebellious in a social sense, but inwardly free. No ideology can possess a person who has died to their false self. To die before you die, this is the secret behind every mystical tradition. Jung discovered it not in monasteries, but in the unconscious itself. When the old self collapses, there is a moment of void, a terrifying silence where everything familiar disappears. You may feel as though you've lost your mind, but if you can endure that silence without rushing to rebuild your identity, something miraculous happens. A new order begins to emerge from the chaos. You start to see patterns, synchronicities, signs. Life begins to respond differently to you because you are no longer interpreting it through the narrow lens of ego. You have entered what Jung called the realm of the self, a state of participation with the totality of being. This is the psychological rebirth, the resurrection after the crucifixion of the ego. You emerge lighter, more fluid, less attached to roles and opinions. You still have a personality, but it no longer imprisons you. You play it consciously, knowing it is a mask, not your essence. The old self was reactive, driven by fear and survival. The new self is responsive, guided by intuition and alignment. Where once you chased meaning, now you are meaning. But Jung also warned that this rebirth carries responsibility. Once you awaken to the deeper self, you can no longer blame the world for your suffering. You recognize that reality mirrors your state of consciousness. Every conflict, every limitation, every shadow you meet in others reflects something unintegrated within. Transformation, then, is not the end of work. It is the beginning of a higher order of work. The outer world becomes your mirror, your teacher, your laboratory. In this sense, Jung's forbidden idea destroys not only your old self, but the illusion of separation between inner and outer, self and other, psyche and cosmos. The unconscious is not confined to your mind. It extends into reality itself. This is where Jung's theories intersect with mysticism, with quantum physics, with the law of attraction and synchronicity. He proposed that psyche and matter are not separate, but two aspects of the same underlying reality. Transformation within the psyche reverberates through the external world. When you face your shadow, life changes around you. When you integrate what was denied, your relationships shift, opportunities appear, synchronicities multiply. This is not superstition. It's the natural correspondence between inner order and outer experience. As above, so below, as within, so without. The destruction of the old self is the restoration of harmony between consciousness and the universe. And yet, this journey has no end. Every realization births another shadow. Every integration reveals deeper layers. Individuation is not a destination, but a continuous unfolding. To live in this way is to accept that transformation never stops. You are forever shedding, forever dying, forever being reborn. The forbidden idea is not merely to destroy your old self once. It is to live in a perpetual state of death and rebirth, to let go moment by moment, trusting that what remains is always enough. Now that we have explored the psychological and symbolic depth of this transformation, the question becomes, how do you live it? How do you take Jung's forbidden idea from theory into direct experience? Because it is not enough to understand the death of the self intellectually. The ego can study its own funeral endlessly and still survive. True transformation happens only through embodiment, through practice, confrontation, and surrender. The first practical step is radical self-observation. Begin to notice your persona, the roles you play each day. Watch how you speak differently with your boss than with your friends, how you shrink or inflate depending on who is watching. Jung said the persona is necessary, but only when worn consciously, like a costume in a play. When you forget it's a mask, it becomes a prison. So throughout the day, silently ask yourself, who is speaking right now? Who is reacting? You'll begin to see that what you call I is not a singular being, but a series of shifting identities performing for approval, safety, or control. This realization doesn't need judgment. It needs awareness. The second practice is shadow work. The shadow cannot be integrated through willpower. It must be brought into the light of consciousness with compassion. One powerful method is journaling. Write freely about your jealousies, resentments, or fears without censoring. Ask yourself what each emotion is trying to protect. Beneath every darkness lies a distorted light. Anger guards your boundaries. Envy points toward unlived potential. Fear guards wisdom. Once you understand the purpose of the shadow, it transforms from monster to ally. Another method is projection tracking. Every time someone irritates you, pause and ask, what aspect of myself am I seeing in them? This single question, asked with honesty, begins to dissolve unconscious projections faster than any philosophy. Meditation also becomes crucial, not as escapism, but as a furnace of presence. Sit each day and let the chaos of your mind unfold without resistance. Watch thoughts rise and fall, identities appear and disappear. Over time, you'll glimpse the silent observer beneath it all, the self that does not change. This witnessing awareness is the space where the old self dies. When you no longer identify with the thought, I am angry, but simply observe, anger is arising, you've already begun the process of disidentification. The ego loses its absolute power when it is seen through. Dream work is another doorway Jung valued deeply. Keep a dream journal by your bed. Dreams are letters from the unconscious written in symbols. Instead of analyzing them logically, feel them intuitively. Ask, what part of me is speaking here? What emotion wants recognition? Over time, you'll notice that your dreams evolve as your consciousness expands. Nightmares soften, symbols clarify, and messages grow subtler. This is the psyche communicating its ongoing alchemy, the transformation of the old into the new. A more advanced practice is what Jung called active imagination. This is a conscious dialogue with the figures of your unconscious. Close your eyes, relax, and imagine meeting your shadow, your inner child, or any recurring figure from dreams. Speak to them as you would a friend. Ask what they want, what they need, what they fear. Don't control the imagery. Let it unfold naturally. These conversations are sacred encounters between consciousness and the depths of the psyche. Through them, you integrate lost aspects of your soul. Yet transformation also requires grounding. Spiritual and psychological rebirth can feel destabilizing. if you don't anchor yourself in daily life. Create rituals that reconnect you to the physical world. Walk barefoot on the earth. Practice breathwork. Spend time in silence without screens. Cook a meal consciously. These acts remind the body that it too is part of the sacred process. Remember, individuation is not about escaping humanity, but embodying it fully with awareness. As the old self dissolves, you may experience emptiness or disorientation. The mind may panic, wanting to rebuild an identity. When that happens, practice surrender. Sit with the void, breathe into it. Let silence become your teacher. You'll begin to sense that what seems like emptiness is actually spaciousness, an open field of consciousness from which new life emerges. From this space, intuition begins to guide you. Decisions become effortless. Synchronicities increase, and life starts flowing instead of resisting. One of Jung's greatest insights was that the self communicates not through logic but through symbols and synchronicities. So pay attention to patterns that repeat in your life. Numbers, animals, dreams, chance encounters. These are not coincidences. They are reflections of your inner transformation mirrored by the universe. The more you align with your true self, the more the external world seems to align with you. Above all, remember this. The destruction of the old self is not a war. It is a release. Do not fight the ego. Understand it. Do not hate the shadow. Embrace it. Every part of you longs to return home to wholeness. When fear arises, meet it with curiosity. When pain surfaces, meet it with compassion. Each act of acceptance is a spark of alchemy, the lead of suffering turning into the gold of awareness. Over time, this practice transforms your perception completely. You stop chasing outcomes and start aligning with truth. You realize that the universe is not happening to you, but through you. You begin to live as consciousness itself, aware, open, fluid, and unafraid. And this, ultimately, is what Jung meant by individuation, to become who you are meant to be by surrendering who you thought you were. The destruction of your old self is not a tragedy. It is liberation. What dies is not your essence, but the shell that kept it buried. You are not losing yourself. You are remembering yourself. Jung's forbidden idea reveals that transformation is not about gaining power or perfection. It's about dissolving illusion until only truth remains. When you embrace the darkness instead of running from it, when you face the mirror until it shatters, what emerges is something ancient, infinite, and unbreakable. The ego trembles, but the self is eternal. So let the masks fall. Let the stories end. Let the false I burn away until all that's left is awareness itself, silent, luminous, whole. Because in that stillness, you will discover the deepest secret of all. The one who sought transformation was never real. The one who watches it unfold is who you've been all along.